The radio crackled with static, cutting through the pre-dawn silence like a blade. In the operations tent, shadows danced across classified maps as Lieutenant Colonel Reyes Castellanos adjusted her headset, her calloused fingers tracing the coordinates that had haunted intelligence briefings for 3 months. The fortress of Qasr al-Hadra squatted on the satellite imagery like a malignant tumor, its ancient walls concealing modern horrors that made hardened operators wake up screaming. Viper 6, this is command. You have visual on the target. The voice belonged to Major Harrison Webb, a man whose skepticism had followed Reyes through every deployment since Afghanistan. His tone carried the weight of institutional doubt, the kind reserved for anomalies that didn't fit neatly into doctrinal boxes. Reyes pressed her eye to the scope, the fortress materializing in crystalline detail 2 kilometers away. Through the thermal imaging, she could see the heat signatures of 17 tangos moving with the lazy confidence of predators who believed themselves untouchable. They had reason for that confidence. The fortress had repelled 3 separate assault attempts, claiming 47 coalition lives in the process. Each failure had been attributed to inadequate intelligence, poor timing, or simple bad luck. But Reyes knew better. Solid copy, command. I count 17 military-aged males. Pattern of life suggests shift change at 6:30 hours. Recommend immediate action. Her voice carried no trace of uncertainty, despite the magnitude of what she was proposing. The intelligence package had identified this facility as the nerve center for a trafficking network that moved high-value targets across 3 countries. Diplomats, aid workers, journalists, all had disappeared into this black hole of concrete and despair. The silence that followed spoke volumes. Through the comm channel, she could hear the muffled conversation of men who had never seen her work, men who knew her only through whispered stories and official reprimands. They called her the widow behind her back, a reference to her tendency to operate alone and her husband's death in a helicopter crash 18 months prior. What they didn't know was that Miguel had been her spotter, her anchor, her reason for coming home. His absence had transformed her from a precise operator into something altogether more dangerous. Viper 6, stand by for tasking authority. Webb's reluctance bled through the encryption. This wasn't just about tactical deployment. It was about betting 17 lives and a strategic objective on a woman whose reputation existed somewhere between legend and liability. The fortress waited, patient as death itself, while careers and lives hung in the balance of a decision that would echo through military history. The morning briefing tent buzzed with the particular energy that preceded high-stakes operations. Reyes sat apart from the SEAL team, methodically cleaning her Mk-22 advanced sniper rifle, while the operators discussed their approach with the casual brutality of men who had reduced warfare to a science. Team leader Lieutenant Commander Jackson Sledge Morrison dominated the conversation, his massive frame casting shadows across the tactical display as he outlined the conventional assault plan. We breach here, here, and here. Morrison pointed to 3 separate entry points on the fortress diagram. Standard room-clearing protocol, sequence charges, overwhelming firepower. Classic hammer and anvil, gentlemen. Nothing fancy, nothing cute. His eyes flicked toward Reyes with undisguised disdain. No unnecessary risks. The barb wasn't subtle. Morrison had made his position clear during their brief interaction the previous evening. Special operations was a brotherhood, and she would never be more than a well-intentioned intruder. His team, Coulson's Razor, Brick, Nitro, and Prophet, nodded with the synchronized agreement of men who had bled together, killed together, and trusted each other with truths they would never share with outsiders. Captain Elena Vasquez, the intelligence officer, spread additional photographs across the table. The images showed the fortress from multiple angles, each revealing new layers of defensive complexity. Thermal imaging confirms the 17 personnel count, she announced, her crisp professionalism cutting through the testosterone-charged atmosphere. But there's something else. Subsurface tunnels, probably Ottoman-era construction. If this goes sideways, they have multiple escape routes. Reyes looked up from her rifle, her dark eyes reflecting the harsh fluorescent lighting. "Give me 7 minutes," she said quietly. The tent fell silent except for the distant rumble of helicopters conducting pre-flight checks. 7 minutes, and I'll clear that fortress myself." The laughter came first from Brick, a demolitions expert whose scarred hands told stories of explosives that had detonated too close. 7 minutes. Sister, we've been planning this for weeks. You think you're going to Rambo your way through 17 hostiles with a bolt-action rifle? Morrison's smile was sharp as broken glass. "This isn't Call of Duty, Castellanos. These are hardened fighters, not paper targets. They've been expecting us since the last failed assault. Every angle is covered, every approach is compromised. One shooter, no matter how good, doesn't stand a chance against those odds." But Colonel Patricia Hendricks, the operation commander, had been studying Ray's service record. 3 tours in Afghanistan, 4 in Iraq, with a confirmed kill count that remained classified above her security clearance. The woman sitting before them had earned her reputation one trigger pull at a time, often under conditions that would have broken lesser operators. Her psychological evaluation mentioned emotional detachment consistent with extreme trauma processing, and tactical decision-making unimpaired by conventional moral constraints. In military terms, she was a precision instrument forged by grief and tempered by necessity. "What do you need?" Hendricks asked, her question cutting through the skeptical murmurs like a command decision. The tense atmosphere shifted, electricity crackling between competing philosophies of warfare. Reyes smiled for the first time in months, and something predatory flickered behind her eyes. The pre-dawn sky stretched above the Iraqi desert like burnished copper, stars fading into the promise of another scorching day. Reyes lay prone on the rocky outcrop, her ghillie suit rendering her virtually invisible against the terrain. Through her scope, the fortress revealed its secrets in thermal gradients and shadow patterns. The ancient walls, built to withstand siege engines and cannon fire, now sheltered modern monsters who had perverted the sanctuary into a prison. Her radio earpiece whispered with the controlled chaos of military coordination. "Overwatch, this is Sledge. We're in position for primary assault. Charges are set, teams are ready. You sure about this crazy plan of yours?" The mockery in Morrison's voice was barely concealed. Behind him, she could hear the steady breathing of his team, men who had spent the last hour positioning themselves for a conventional assault that would turn the fortress into a killing field. Their approach was textbook, overwhelming force applied simultaneously from multiple vectors, designed to shock and disorient defenders before they could mount effective resistance. It was a plan that would work, eventually, but at a cost measured in body bags and political fallout. "Solid copy, Sledge. Hold your positions until I signal." Reyes adjusted her scope's parallax, the fortress snapping into perfect focus. Through the thermal imaging, she could see the guards moving through their predictable patterns, a choreography of complacency that would prove fatal. "Prophet, I need continuous intel on internal movement. Any changes in thermal signatures, any deviation from established patterns." Prophet's voice carried the flat professionalism of a man who had spent years reading death through electronic eyes. "Roger, Overwatch. 17 confirmed personnel, rotating watch every 2 hours. Primary concentration in the western courtyard, secondary positions on the ramparts. No changes to established patterns." The fortress squatted in the growing light like a monument to human cruelty. Intelligence reports indicated that somewhere within those walls, 3 humanitarian workers and a journalist were being held for auction to the highest bidder. Their faces haunted the mission briefing materials, young people who had come to help rebuild a shattered nation, only to become commodities in a marketplace that trafficked in human suffering. Reyes chambered her first round, the metallic click lost in the desert wind. The bullet was a work of art, a 175-grain Sierra Matchking boat-tail hollow point, hand-loaded for maximum accuracy and terminal performance. She had prepared 8 rounds, each one precision-crafted for a specific purpose. In her mind, 17 targets had already been reduced to a mathematical problem with a kinetic solution. Through her scope, she watched the first sentry complete his circuit of the eastern wall. In exactly 4 minutes and 30 seconds, he would pause at the corner tower to light a cigarette, a routine so consistent that Prophet had timed it across 3 separate observation periods. That moment of stillness would mark the beginning of the end for Qasr al-Hadra. The first shot shattered the morning silence like the crack of divine judgment. Through her scope, Reyes watched the eastern sentry's head disappear in a pink mist, his body crumpling against the ancient stones as his cigarette tumbled into the courtyard below. The 175-grain bullet had traveled 2,847 feet per second across 2 kilometers of desert air, arriving with the mathematical certainty of physics and the moral weight of justice. Contact, contact, sniper, sniper, sniper. The panicked Arabic echoed from the fortress walls as the remaining 16 defenders scrambled for cover. But Reyes had anticipated their every move, studying their patterns with the patient obsession of a predator who understood that chaos was simply another form of order waiting to be imposed. Her second shot took the communications operator as he reached for his radio, the bullet punching through the concrete barrier he had chosen for protection. The man's final transmission became a gurgle of static and blood, cutting the fortress off from outside reinforcement. Through her earpiece, she could hear Prophet's calm narration. Tango down, eastern position. Second tango down, communications post. 15 remaining, scattered and seeking cover. The defenders were well trained, she had to admit. Instead of clustering together or exposing themselves in panic, they moved with the disciplined desperation of men who understood they were being hunted by a ghost. But training could only overcome reality for so long, and the reality was that Reyes had transformed their sanctuary into a shooting gallery. Her third shot was a calculated risk, a deflection shot that used the fortress's own geometry against its defenders. The bullet struck the western rampart at a precise angle, fragmenting into supersonic shrapnel that found the fighter hiding behind what he believed was impenetrable cover. His scream echoed across the courtyard, cut short by Reyes' fourth shot as he stumbled into the open. "Jesus Christ," Morrison's voice crackled through the calm. "How is she making those shots? That last one was impossible." Prophet's response carried the analytical detachment of a professional observer. Deflection shooting, probably calculated using the wall's angle and bullet fragmentation patterns. Advanced ballistics, not impossible if you understand the physics. 13 tangos remaining, bunching up in the central keep. The tactical radio erupted with Arabic commands as the remaining defenders attempted to coordinate their response. But they were fighting an enemy they couldn't see, couldn't locate, and couldn't understand. Reyes had become a force of nature, delivering death from an impossible distance with the precision of a surgeon and the inexorability of an avalanche. Her fifth shot punched through a wooden door, finding the fighter who thought timber would provide adequate protection from a round designed to penetrate vehicle armor. The bullet continued through his chest and into the man behind him, achieving the kind of double elimination that would have seemed fictional if not for the thermal imaging that confirmed both kills. 11 remaining, Prophet reported, his voice steady despite witnessing something that challenged conventional understanding of marksmanship. "They're trying to retreat to the underground levels." Reyes smiled grimly as she chambered her sixth round. The fortress was becoming a tomb, and she was its architect. The silence that followed her sixth shot was different, pregnant with the terrible understanding that death had taken residence in the ancient stones. Through her scope, Reyes could see the thermal signatures of the remaining 9 defenders huddled in the fortress's central keep, their movements betraying the paralytic terror of men who had realized they were not hunters but prey. "Overwatch, this is Prophet. Multiple tangos have retreated to subsurface levels. Thermal imaging is compromised below ground level." His voice carried the clinical detachment of a professional who had learned to compartmentalize horror, but even Prophet seemed shaken by the systematic destruction he was witnessing. The fortress had fallen silent except for the occasional shout in Arabic, desperate communications between men who were beginning to understand that their impregnable stronghold had become a killing field. Reyes chambered her seventh round, the metallic click lost in the desert wind that had begun to pick up as the sun climbed higher into the Iraqi sky. "Sledge, what's your assessment?" Colonel Hendricks' voice cut through the tactical frequency with the authority of command. The entire operation had shifted from a conventional assault to something unprecedented, a single shooter dismantling a fortified position with the methodical precision of a demolition expert. Morrison's response carried grudging admiration wrapped in professional skepticism. "She's neutralized 8 confirmed hostiles in under 4 minutes, but those remaining tangos have hardened positions in the keep, and we still have 4 hostages unaccounted for. This could turn into a siege situation." But Reyes was already moving, her ghillie suit rendering her invisible as she shifted position along the ridgeline. The fortress's defenders would be expecting continued fire from her original position, a tactical assumption that would prove fatal. She had studied the fortress's blueprints until she could navigate its corridors in her sleep, understanding that modern warfare was as much about psychology as ballistics. Her new position offered a different angle into the central courtyard, where thermal imaging revealed 2 fighters attempting to establish a machine gun nest. They moved with the urgent efficiency of professionals who understood they were running out of time and options. The heavy weapon would command the approaches to the keep, making any rescue attempt prohibitively costly in terms of both time and casualties. Through her scope, she could see the lead gunner's face, a young man, perhaps 25, with the focused intensity of someone who believed he was fighting for a cause larger than himself. In another context, under different circumstances, he might have been a soldier worthy of respect. But context was everything in warfare, and in this context, he was an obstacle to the rescue of innocent civilians. Her 7th shot removed the machine gunner's head with surgical precision, the bullet arriving before the sound of the rifle's report. His partner dove for cover, but Reyes had anticipated the movement. Her 8th and final shot found him as he crawled toward the abandoned weapon, the bullet punching through his spine and ending his war in a spreading pool of crimson. 7 remaining tangos, Prophet reported, his voice now carrying something approaching awe. All confirmed retreated to subsurface levels. Primary targets neutralized in 6 minutes, 43 seconds. The fortress lay silent under the climbing sun, its ancient walls now sheltering only the dead and the dying. The tactical frequency buzzed with the controlled urgency of an operation reaching its critical phase. Through her scope, Reyes could see thermal signatures moving in the fortress's underground chambers, 7 remaining fighters who had retreated to positions that put them dangerously close to the hostages. The game had shifted from pure elimination to surgical extraction, requiring a different kind of precision altogether. "Overwatch, this is command. Outstanding work, but we need those hostages intact. Rules of engagement have changed. Minimize civilian casualties, preserve intelligence assets." Colonel Hendricks' voice carried the weight of political considerations that extended far beyond the immediate tactical situation. Reyes understood the implications immediately. The surviving fighters had likely positioned themselves among the hostages, transforming the rescue operation into a complex negotiation between firepower and restraint. Her rifle, which had served as the instrument of divine retribution for the past 7 minutes, would now require a different kind of precision, the ability to distinguish between guilty and innocent when both were hidden beneath tons of ancient stone. "Sledge, initiate assault phase. Overwatch has softened the target sufficiently for conventional operations." The order came from Hendricks, but Reyes could hear the reluctance in the colonel's voice. The decision to transition from sniper operations to close-quarters combat was driven by necessity rather than preference. Morrison's team moved with the fluid professionalism of operators who had rehearsed this transition countless times. Roger, command. Moving to primary breach point. Overwatch, what's your assessment of remaining resistance? Through her earpiece, Reyes could hear the SEAL team's approach, the careful footfalls of men who understood that the next few minutes would determine whether this operation became a tactical success or a political disaster. The fortress walls, which had protected her targets for the past 7 minutes, would now provide cover for the defenders while complicating the rescue of innocent civilians. 7 confirmed hostiles, subsurface level, likely positioned among hostage assets. Reyes kept her scope trained on the thermal signatures below, watching for any movement that might indicate preparation for a final stand. Recommend extreme caution. These individuals have demonstrated tactical proficiency and will likely attempt to use civilians as human shields. The ancient fortress seemed to hold its breath as Morrison's team approached the main entrance. 8 dead fighters lay scattered across its ramparts and courtyards, their bodies testament to the lethal precision that had transformed an impregnable position into a charnel house. But the real test was about to begin, the delicate work of extracting life from the jaws of death. "Charges set," reported Brick, his voice carrying the professional satisfaction of a demolitions expert who took pride in his craft. "Breaching in 30 seconds." Through her scope, Reyes watched the fortress's main gate, her finger resting lightly on the trigger of her now empty rifle. The mathematical precision that had served her so well during the elimination phase would now require adaptation to the chaotic reality of close-quarters combat. The explosion, when it came, shattered the morning air like thunder. The breaching charge transformed the fortress's ancient gate into a shower of stone and twisted metal, the explosion echoing across the desert like the final judgment of an angry god. Through the swirling dust and debris, Morrison's team moved with the fluid precision of water flowing through broken channels, their night vision equipment rendering the darkness irrelevant as they penetrated the heart of enemy territory. Breach successful, proceeding to primary objective. Morrison's voice carried the controlled aggression of a professional who had done this dance countless times before. Behind him, Razor and Brick moved in perfect synchronization, their weapons sweeping corners and alcoves with the mechanical efficiency of men who understood that hesitation was often fatal. Reyes maintained her overwatch position, her empty rifle now serving as a psychological weapon rather than a kinetic one. The surviving defenders would know she was still out there, still watching, still capable of reaching into their sanctuary and extracting terrible retribution. The knowledge would make them hesitant, uncertain, prone to the kinds of mistakes that allowed rescue operations to succeed. Movement, subsurface level, Prophet reported from his elevated position. Thermal signatures indicate 7 hostiles clustered around what appears to be a central chamber, probable hostage location based on facility blueprints. The underground portions of the fortress had been constructed during the Ottoman period, designed to withstand siege warfare and provide sanctuary during extended conflicts. But those same defensive advantages now worked against the occupying force, channeling Morrison's team through predictable approaches that could easily become kill zones if the defenders maintained their composure. "Contact front," Nitro's voice erupted through the comm as automatic weapons fire echoed from within the fortress. The sharp crack of assault rifles mixed with the deeper boom of shotguns, creating a symphony of violence that spoke to the desperate nature of the final engagement. Through her scope, Reyes could see muzzle flashes illuminating the fortress's interior spaces, strobing patterns of light that revealed the deadly choreography taking place beneath the ancient stones. Her team was fighting room to room, corridor by corridor, against an enemy that had chosen to make their final stand among innocent civilians. 2 tangos down, hallway secured, Razor reported, his breathing heavy but controlled. "Moving to secondary objective. Be advised, we're taking fire from elevated positions." The tactical situation was evolving rapidly, shifting from the mathematical precision of long-range engagement to the brutal calculus of close-quarters combat. Reyes found herself in the strange position of being simultaneously critical to the operation and utterly useless, her primary weapon empty, her targets beyond her reach, her role reduced to that of psychological warfare specialist. "Prophet, I need continuous updates on thermal movement. Any indication of hostage locations." Morrison's voice carried the stress of a leader who understood that the next few minutes would determine the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. The ancient fortress shuddered under the weight of modern warfare, its stones bearing witness to violence that its builders could never have imagined. The gunfire from within the fortress had intensified into a sustained firefight, the acoustic signatures telling a story of desperate men making their final stand in chambers that had witnessed countless other last stands throughout the centuries. Through her scope, Reyes could see the thermal blooms of muzzle flashes, painting the ancient walls in patterns of light and shadow, each burst representing another moment in the deadly mathematics of close-quarters combat. "Sledge, this is Brick. We've got eyes on the hostages. 3 civilians, 1 journalist, all appear to be alive but restrained. Problem is, they're positioned in the center of the chamber with 5 hostiles using them as cover." The demolitions expert's voice carried the frustrated professionalism of a man who had the tools to end the standoff, but couldn't use them without risking innocent lives. Morrison's response crackled through the tactical frequency. "Understood. Hold position. Establish overwatch on the chamber. Do not engage until we have a clear shot picture." The situation had devolved into exactly the kind of tactical nightmare that conventional assault doctrine was designed to avoid. The remaining defenders had positioned themselves perfectly, using the hostages as human shields while maintaining fields of fire that would make any direct assault prohibitively costly. It was a scenario that required surgical precision rather than overwhelming firepower. "Overwatch, this is command. What's your assessment?" Colonel Hendrick's question carried the weight of command responsibility and political calculation. The success or failure of this operation would echo through intelligence communities and diplomatic circles for years to come. Reyes studied the thermal imaging data streaming from Prophet's equipment, analyzing the positioning of hostile and friendly forces with the cold calculation that had made her reputation. The chamber layout was clear in her mind, a circular room with multiple approaches, currently occupied by 5 defenders and 4 hostages arranged in a defensive cluster that maximized civilian exposure while minimizing tactical options. 7 minutes, 17 seconds since initial contact," she replied, her voice carrying a certainty that cut through the tactical chatter like a blade. "Request permission to reposition for alternate engagement angle." The suggestion was tactically sound but logistically problematic. Moving from her current position would require precious time that the hostages might not have, while potentially exposing her to counter-sniper fire from any remaining defenders who had maintained external security. But sometimes warfare required calculated risks that pushed beyond conventional operational parameters. "Negative, Overwatch. Maintain current position and provide situational awareness." Hendrick's response reflected the conservative approach of a commander who understood that additional complications could transform a tactical success into a strategic disaster. Through the fortress walls, the sound of Arabic voices carried on the desert wind, heated conversation between men who understood they were negotiating the terms of their own deaths. The hostage crisis had reached its critical phase, where every decision carried the potential for tragedy measured in innocent lives and international headlines. Morrison's voice cut through the tension. "We're going in. Prophet, I need real-time thermal on all movement. Overwatch, if you see an opportunity, take it." The assault began with the synchronized precision of a surgical strike, Morrison's team moving through the fortress's underground chambers like water flowing through broken stone. Each operator understood their role in the deadly choreography about to unfold, a dance of violence and restraint that would determine whether 4 innocent lives would survive the next 60 seconds. "Flashbang out," Razor announced, his voice barely audible over the tactical frequency. The stun grenade detonated in the chamber with a thunderclap that shook dust from the ancient ceiling, followed immediately by the controlled chaos of professional operators engaging multiple targets in confined space. Through her scope, Reyes watched the thermal signatures blur into a confused mass of heat and movement as the rescue operation reached its climax. The mathematical precision that had served her during the elimination phase was useless now. Her teammates were fighting in close proximity to their objectives, requiring split-second decisions that balanced aggression with restraint. 2 tangos down, 3 remaining. Nitro's voice carried the controlled excitement of a man who had found his element in the crucible of combat. Hostages are mobile, repeat, hostages are mobile. The tactical situation was evolving faster than real-time communication could track. In the underground chamber, 7 years of training and experience compressed into moments of pure instinct as Morrison's team engaged an enemy that had chosen death over surrender. The remaining defenders were fighting with the desperate ferocity of men who understood they had nothing left to lose. "Contact left." Morrison's shout was followed by the sustained burst of automatic weapons fire, the sound echoing through the stone corridors like the voice of ancient gods demanding blood sacrifice. Through the fortress walls, Reyes could hear the distinctive crack of different weapon systems, the high-velocity snap of American assault rifles mixing with the deeper roar of foreign-manufactured firearms. Prophet's voice provided the analytical soundtrack to the unfolding drama, 3 hostile signatures remaining, clustered in defensive position. 1 appears to be wounded, 4 civilian signatures moving toward extraction point. The rescue operation had reached its critical phase, where success or failure would be determined by factors beyond tactics or training. Courage, luck, and the unpredictable variables of human behavior would now determine whether this mission became a case study in special operations excellence or a cautionary tale about the limits of military precision. "Overwatch, this is Sledge. We need immediate medical evacuation for multiple casualties. Hostages are secure, but we've got wounded personnel requiring urgent care." Morrison's voice carried the weary satisfaction of a professional who had accomplished the impossible while paying a price that would be calculated later. Through her scope, Reyes watched thermal signatures emerging from the fortress's main entrance, the slow procession of victory measured in lives saved and objectives achieved. The ancient stones, which had witnessed the rise and fall of empires, now sheltered a different kind of history being written in blood and determination. The medical evacuation helicopter's rotor wash stirred the desert sand into spiraling clouds that obscured the fortress like a benediction of dust and wind. Through the swirling debris, stretcher teams moved with the urgent precision of medical professionals who understood that the difference between life and death was often measured in minutes rather than hours. Reyes descended from her overwatch position, her ghillie suit shedding camouflage netting like the molted skin of some desert predator returning to human form. The rifle that had served as the instrument of divine judgment for the past 8 minutes hung from her shoulder, with the weight of empty chambers and completed objectives. 8 confirmed kills, 0 civilian casualties, mission parameters exceeded in every measurable category. "Outstanding work, Castellanos." Colonel Hendricks approached through the settling dust, her voice carrying the professional appreciation of a commander who understood she had just witnessed something extraordinary. "That was some of the finest marksmanship I've seen in 23 years of military service." But Reyes wasn't looking at the colonel. Her attention was focused on the stretchers being loaded into the evacuation helicopter, 3 humanitarian workers, and 1 journalist who had spent the last 6 weeks believing they would die in an underground chamber beneath ancient stones. Their faces showed the particular pallor of people who had stared into the abyss and found their way back to sunlight. Morrison emerged from the fortress's entrance, his tactical gear stained with cordite and dust, his expression carrying the complex satisfaction of a professional who had accomplished something that would haunt his dreams for years to come. Behind him, his team moved with the careful precision of men who understood they had just participated in something that challenged conventional understanding of what was possible in modern warfare. "Overwatch," Morrison called, his voice carrying a different tone than the mockery that had characterized their earlier interactions. That was something else entirely. I've never seen shooting like that, not in 15 years of special operations. The acknowledgement hung in the desert air like a flag of truce between competing philosophies of warfare. Reyes had proven something more than marksmanship. She had demonstrated that individual excellence could sometimes achieve what institutional methodology could not. The fortress of Qasr al-Hadra, which had resisted 3 separate assault attempts, had fallen to 1 woman with 8 bullets, and the mathematical certainty of physics applied with surgical precision. Prophet approached with his thermal imaging equipment, his analytical mind still processing what he had witnessed through electronic eyes. "Ma'am, I need to ask, how did you calculate those deflection shots? The ballistics don't match anything in our standard tables." Reyes smiled for the second time in months, but this expression carried something different, not predatory satisfaction, but the quiet contentment of a professional who had found her purpose in the intersection of skill and necessity. The desert wind stirred her dark hair as she looked up at the climbing sun, its light revealing the fortress walls decorated with the evidence of her work. "Physics," she replied simply, "just physics and a little bit of faith." The debriefing tent buzzed with the particular energy that followed successful operations, a mixture of professional satisfaction and the subtle relief that came from surviving another encounter with the mathematics of mortality. Maps and photographs covered every available surface, documenting the tactical evolution of an engagement that would be studied in military academies for decades to come. Colonel Hendricks presided over the session with the methodical thoroughness of a commander who understood that institutional learning was often more valuable than individual heroics. The fortress assault had succeeded beyond all operational parameters, but the methodology raised questions that challenged fundamental assumptions about force deployment and tactical doctrine. 8 confirmed kills in 6 minutes, 43 seconds, she announced, reading from the preliminary after-action report. 0 civilian casualties, 4 hostages successfully recovered, minimal friendly casualties limited to superficial wounds sustained during close-quarters combat. From a purely tactical perspective, this operation represents a textbook example of precision application of force. Morrison sat across from Reyes, his expression carrying the complex admiration of a professional who had been forced to revise his understanding of what was possible in modern warfare. His team had performed flawlessly during the assault phase, but everyone in the tent understood that their success had been built on the foundation of 8 perfectly placed shots that had transformed an impregnable fortress into a killing field. "The question," Hendricks continued, "is whether this methodology can be systematized, studied, and incorporated into standard operational doctrine. What we witness today appears to challenge conventional understanding of individual capability versus institutional approach." Captain Vasquez consulted her intelligence summaries, her analytical mind working to place the morning's events within the broader context of regional operations. The fortress had withstood 3 previous assault attempts using conventional methodology, combined arms approach, overwhelming firepower, textbook tactical doctrine. All failed with significant casualties and no mission success. The implicit comparison hung in the air like a challenge, to everything the special operations community believed about teamwork, institutional training, and the superiority of collective approach over individual excellence. Reyes had accomplished alone what teams of highly trained professionals had failed to achieve through coordinated effort. "Ma'am," Morrison interjected, his voice carrying the measured tone of a leader who was still processing the morning's events. "With all due respect, what we witnessed wasn't just marksmanship. That was something beyond standard tactical training. The deflection shots alone required calculations that most operators couldn't perform under ideal conditions, much less in combat environment." Prophet nodded agreement, his thermal imaging data providing mathematical support for the impossible. "The ballistics don't match anything in our standard tables." She was calculating ricochet angles, bullet fragmentation patterns, and target acquisition through solid barriers. "That's beyond conventional sniper training." Reyes sat quietly throughout the discussion, her dark eyes reflecting the harsh fluorescent lighting as the military professionals around her attempted to quantify and systematize something that existed at the intersection of training, instinct, and whatever unnamed quality transformed competent operators into legends that would outlive their creators. The discussion continued through the afternoon heat, military professionals struggling to place the morning's events within frameworks that could be taught, replicated, and institutionalized. But some achievements existed beyond the reach of doctrine and standard operating procedures, representing the convergence of skill, circumstance, and whatever intangible qualities separated the exceptional from the merely competent. "The psychological impact alone justifies further study," argued Major Webb, his earlier skepticism replaced by analytical fascination. 8 confirmed kills from an impossible distance, executed with precision that challenges conventional understanding of human capability. The intelligence value of this methodology could revolutionize force deployment calculations. Captain Vasquez spread additional photographs across the table, satellite imagery that showed the fortress before and after the engagement. The difference was stark. What had been a functioning terrorist facility was now a monument to the application of mathematics and mortality in equal measure. Regional intelligence assets report that similar facilities have been abandoned throughout the sector. Word travels fast in these networks. The broader implications were becoming clear. The fortress assault had achieved something beyond tactical success. It had created a psychological effect that rippled through enemy networks like a stone thrown into still water. The idea that a single operator could neutralize an entire facility challenged fundamental assumptions about security and defensive positioning. "We need to understand the methodology," Morrison said, his voice carrying the earnest intensity of a professional who recognized he had witnessed something that could save lives in future operations. "Not just the technical aspects, but the mental framework that allows for those kinds of calculations under extreme stress." Reyes finally spoke, her voice cutting through the analytical discussion with the quiet authority of someone who had transformed theory into reality through the application of will and precision. "You can't teach what I did this morning," she said simply. "You can teach marksmanship, ballistics, tactical positioning, but what happened at that fortress wasn't just technique." The tent fell silent except for the distant sound of helicopters conducting routine patrols. Through the canvas walls, the Iraqi desert stretched endlessly toward horizons that held secrets and threats in equal measure. The ancient land had witnessed countless conflicts, but few had been resolved with the mathematical precision that characterized the morning's engagement. "Then what was it?" Hendricks asked, her question carrying the weight of command responsibility and institutional curiosity. Reyes looked toward the tent's entrance, where the afternoon sun painted the sand in shades of gold and amber. Somewhere beyond the visible horizon, other fortresses squatted in the desert like malignant tumors, sheltering horrors that made international headlines and diplomatic nightmares. The work was far from over. "Grief," she replied, her voice carrying the quiet certainty of someone who had found purpose in the intersection of loss and necessity. Grief applied with surgical precision to targets that deserved everything they received. The admission hung in the superheated air like a confession that explained everything and nothing. The convoy departed the forward operating base as the sun reached its zenith, transforming the Iraqi desert into a furnace that tested the limits of human endurance and mechanical reliability. Reyes rode in the lead vehicle, her rifle secured in its travel case, her mind already processing the intelligence briefings that would determine the next application of her particular skill set. 3 weeks had passed since the fortress assault, and the ripple effects continued to propagate through regional terrorist networks like expanding circles of fear and uncertainty. Intelligence reports indicated that 7 similar facilities had been abandoned in the immediate aftermath, their occupants choosing relocation over the risk of encountering the phantom sniper, who had turned an impregnable stronghold into a tomb. The psychological warfare aspect had exceeded all projections. Enemy communications, intercepted by signals intelligence assets, spoke in hushed tones about the ghost of Qasr al-Hadra, a mythological figure who could reach through stone walls and deliver death from impossible distances. The legend was growing beyond the facts, becoming something larger than the woman who had created it through 8 precisely placed bullets and the application of physics to the problems of mortality. Viper 6, this is command. We have a new tasking for you. Colonel Hendrick's voice crackled through the encrypted communication system, carrying the weight of urgency that characterized high-priority missions. Intelligence has identified a time-sensitive target approximately 40 kilometers northeast of your current position. Through the armored glass of the convoy vehicle, Reyes watched the desert landscape scroll past like pages in a book written in sand and stone. The terrain told stories of ancient civilizations and modern conflicts, each ridge and valley bearing witness to humanity's eternal struggle between order and chaos. Her reflection in the glass showed a woman who had been transformed by grief into something that existed at the intersection of precision and purpose. Solid copy, command. What's the nature of the target? Her question carried the professional detachment of an operator who had learned to compartmentalize emotional investment while maintaining tactical focus. The fortress assault had proven her methodology, but each new mission carried its own variables and challenges. Captain Vasquez's voice joined the communication channel, her intelligence briefing crisp with the urgency of developing situations. High-value target, codename the Architect, suspected of coordinating the trafficking network that operated out of Qasr al-Hadra. Current intelligence places him at a compound approximately 2 hours from your position. The significance was immediately clear. The fortress assault had been tactical success, but the strategic objective required eliminating the organizational structure that made such facilities possible. The Architect represented the intellectual center of a network that had caused immeasurable suffering across 3 countries and countless innocent lives. What's the timeline? Morrison's voice joined the frequency, his team having been assigned as backup and extraction support for whatever operation was developing. The SEAL unit had adapted their methodology to complement Rey's precision approach, creating a hybrid tactical framework that maximized both individual excellence and team effectiveness. Windows closes at 1800 hours, Hendricks replied. Target will be departing the compound for a meeting with regional coordinators. This represents our only confirmed opportunity to eliminate a high-value asset who has evaded capture for 18 months. The compound materialized through the heat shimmer like a mirage becoming solid reality, its modern construction contrasting sharply with the ancient desert that surrounded it. Unlike the historical fortress of Qasr al-Hadra, this facility represented contemporary criminal architecture, purpose-built for security, communications, and the efficient processing of human misery into financial profit. Reyes established her hide position on a rocky outcrop 3 kilometers distant, the maximum effective range for her modified Mk-22 system. Through her scope, the compound revealed its secrets in methodical detail: defensive positions, guard rotations, vehicular access points, and the particular rhythm of criminal operations conducted with military precision. "Overwatch in position," she reported, her voice carrying the calm professionalism of an operator who had found her element in the intersection of mathematics and mortality. "Visual confirmation on target compound, counting 23 personnel, mixed security and administrative functions." The intelligence briefing had identified the architect as a former military officer who had applied conventional tactical doctrine to unconventional criminal enterprise. His compound reflected that background: overlapping fields of fire, redundant communication systems, escape routes that could accommodate rapid evacuation under hostile conditions. It was the kind of target that would normally require company-level assault to neutralize. "Prophet in position," came the second radio check, the thermal imaging specialist having established his observation post on an adjacent ridgeline. "Thermal signatures confirm personnel count. Primary target is expected to depart via the eastern gate at approximately 17:30 hours." Morrison's voice crackled through the tactical frequency. "Sledge team in position for extraction support. Ready to move on your signal, Overwatch." The desert afternoon stretched endlessly toward evening, heat waves distorting the air into liquid mercury that made long-range optical work an exercise in applied physics and atmospheric compensation. Through her scope, Reyes could see guards moving through their predictable patterns, unaware that their routine had been studied, analyzed, and converted into targeting solutions. "Movement at the main building," Prophet reported. "Single individual emerging, appears to match physical description of primary target." Through the magnified optics, Reyes studied the figure walking across the compound's central courtyard. Average height, unremarkable appearance, moving with the confident stride of a man who had never seriously considered that his actions might carry personal consequences. The architect looked like a bureaucrat, which in many ways he was, an administrator of suffering who had reduced human tragedy to spreadsheet calculations and profit margins. Her finger found the trigger, taking up the slack with the practiced motion of someone who had performed this ritual countless times before. The distance was extreme even by her standards, requiring calculations that factored wind speed, atmospheric pressure, target movement, and the particular ballistics of a round that would travel for nearly 5 seconds before reaching its destination. "Target acquired," she whispered into the radio, her voice carrying the finality of a judge pronouncing sentence on crimes that could never be adequately punished by conventional justice. The shot broke the afternoon silence with the crack of divine retribution, delivered at 2,847 feet per second, across 3 kilometers of superheated desert air. Through her scope, Reyes watched the architect's head disappear in a pink mist, his body collapsing onto the compound's concrete courtyard, while his life's work died with him in the space between heartbeats. The reaction was immediate and chaotic. Guards scattered like insects exposed to sudden light, their tactical training warring with the primal terror of being hunted by an invisible predator who could reach across impossible distances to deliver death with surgical precision. Shouts in multiple languages echoed from the compound's buildings, as 24 men tried to process the reality that their leader had been eliminated by an enemy they couldn't see, locate, or comprehend. "Target down," Prophet confirmed, his thermal imaging equipment tracking the panic spreading through the facility like wildfire. "Compound personnel are scattering, multiple individuals fleeing toward vehicle positions." But Reyes wasn't finished. The architect's death was tactically significant, but strategic success required eliminating the organizational structure that would attempt to continue operations under new leadership. Through her scope, she could see figures running toward the communications building, men whose survival would ensure continuity of criminal operations across the region. Her second shot took the communications officer as he reached for a radio that would have warned other network facilities of the attack. The bullet punched through the building's thin walls and found its target with the mathematical certainty of physics applied to moral problems. The man's final transmission became a gurgle of static and blood, cutting the compound off from the broader criminal network. "Two tangos down, communications severed," she reported, chambering her third round with the mechanical precision of someone who had reduced warfare to its essential mathematics. Remaining personnel are mobile, attempting to establish defensive positions. The compound security team was well-trained, responding to the sniper attack with disciplined movements toward hardened positions that would provide cover from long-range fire. But they were fighting an enemy who had studied their facility for hours, mapping every angle, calculating every possible shot, reducing their sanctuary to a collection of geometric problems with kinetic solutions. Her third shot found the security chief as he attempted to coordinate the defensive response from behind what he believed was adequate cover. The bullet's trajectory took it through a narrow gap between concrete barriers, arriving with the inevitability of gravity and the moral weight of justice applied to men who had profited from human suffering. "Command, this is Overwatch. Primary target eliminated, facility neutralized. Request permission to continue prosecution of remaining personnel." Her voice carried the calm professionalism of a surgeon describing a successful procedure, each word measured and precise. Colonel Hendrick's response crackled through the encrypted channel. "Granted. Clean sweep authorized. These individuals represent active threats to regional stability." Through her scope, the compound had become a killing field where men who had built careers on the suffering of innocents now experienced the mathematical certainty of consequences delivered from beyond the horizon. The systematic elimination continued with the methodical precision of a demolition expert, dismantling a structure one support beam at a time. Each shot represented a calculated decision based on intelligence assessments, tactical positioning, and the particular moral algebra that transformed individual criminals into statistical casualties in a larger war against organized evil. Her fourth shot removed the facility's chief of security as he attempted to establish a heavy weapons position that would command the approaches to the compound. The bullet arrived before the sound of the rifle's report, punching through his chest and into the man behind him with the kind of terminal ballistics that left no room for miraculous survival stories. 18 personnel remaining, Prophet reported, his thermal imaging equipment tracking the chaos spreading through the facility like a virus of fear and confusion. Multiple individuals attempting to reach vehicle positions for emergency evacuation. But Reyes had anticipated the evacuation attempt, positioning herself to interdict the primary escape routes with precision fire that would prevent the criminal network's leadership from scattering to establish new facilities elsewhere. The compound's modern design included 3 separate vehicle exits, each requiring different firing solutions based on range, angle, and target presentation. Her fifth shot took the convoy leader as he attempted to start the lead vehicle, the bullet passing through the driver's side window and continuing through the passenger compartment to eliminate a second target in the kind of double elimination that would have seemed fictional if not for the thermal imaging that confirmed both kills. 16 remaining, vehicle convoy neutralized, she reported, chambering her 6th round with the mechanical efficiency of someone who had reduced organized crime to a targeting problem with ballistic solutions. Primary escape routes are compromised. The compound's remaining personnel had begun to understand that their modern fortress was no more impregnable than the ancient walls of Qasr al-Hadra. Panic was spreading through their ranks like wildfire, transforming disciplined criminals into frightened individuals whose survival instincts were overriding their tactical training. Movement toward the eastern perimeter, Prophet announced. Small groups attempting to escape on foot across open terrain. Through her scope, Reyes could see figures running across the desert sand, silhouetted against the afternoon sun like targets in a precision shooting competition. The men who had built careers on controlling the lives of others were now experiencing the particular terror of being hunted by an enemy they couldn't fight, couldn't negotiate with, and couldn't escape. Her sixth shot found a fleeing administrator at nearly 4,000 meters, the extreme range requiring calculations that pushed the limits of both ballistic science and human capability. The bullet's flight time exceeded 6 seconds, during which Reyes had to account for wind variance, atmospheric pressure changes, and the target's continuing movement across uneven terrain. 15 remaining, she whispered into the radio, her voice carrying the quiet satisfaction of a professional who had found perfect expression for skills that existed at the intersection of art and science. The afternoon sun hung lower in the desert sky, painting the sand in shades of gold and crimson that reminded Reyes of other conflicts in other places, where she had applied mathematics to moral problems with surgical precision. Through her scope, the compound had been transformed from a functioning criminal enterprise into a monument to the consequences of choosing evil over good in a world where precision weapons could reach across impossible distances. Overwatch, this is Command. Outstanding work. Intelligence assets confirm that regional criminal networks are reporting total communications blackout from the compound. This represents a strategic victory beyond tactical success. Colonel Hendrick's voice carried the professional satisfaction of a commander who understood that some operations achieved effects far beyond their immediate objectives. But Reyes wasn't listening to congratulations. Her attention was focused on the 15 surviving personnel who were attempting various escape strategies across terrain that offered no concealment from her elevated position. These men represented the intellectual and operational infrastructure of a criminal network that had caused immeasurable suffering across multiple countries. Her seventh shot found the facility's financial officer as he attempted to destroy evidence in a burning barrel behind the main building. The bullet passed through his torso and into the documents he was trying to incinerate, ensuring that intelligence assets would recover information about bank accounts, supply chains, and operational procedures that would cripple similar facilities across the region. 14 remaining, evidence preservation successful, she reported, chambering her eighth and final round with the careful reverence of someone handling the last instrument in a symphony of justice. Request guidance on remaining personnel. Morrison's voice crackled through the tactical frequency. Sledge team is in position for cleanup operations. We can handle the survivors if you've expended your primary ammunition. The offer was tactically sound but philosophically unsatisfying. The compound's remaining personnel had witnessed something that challenged their understanding of security, invulnerability, and the mathematical certainty that their crimes would eventually be answered by forces beyond their control or comprehension. Some lessons were best delivered with the precision that had characterized the entire operation. Negative Sledge. I have 1 round remaining, and there's someone in that compound who deserves special attention. Through her scope, she had identified a figure moving among the survivors with the commanding presence of natural leadership, someone whose survival would ensure operational continuity despite the facility's destruction. The target was the compound's second-in-command, a man whose intelligence file indicated direct responsibility for the trafficking operations that had resulted in dozens of deaths and hundreds of destroyed lives. He moved with the confidence of someone who believed he could survive through tactical skill and institutional knowledge. Her final shot traveled 3,247 meters across superheated desert air, arriving with the mathematical certainty of physics and the moral weight of justice applied to crimes that could never be adequately punished through conventional legal channels. The bullet found its target with surgical precision, removing from the world someone whose continued existence represented a threat to innocent lives across 3 countries. Target down, compound neutralized, mission complete. Her voice carried the quiet satisfaction of a professional who had applied exceptional skill to a worthy cause. The extraction helicopter's rotor wash stirred the desert sand into spiraling clouds that painted the late afternoon sky in patterns of dust and golden light. Through the swirling debris, Reyes walked toward the aircraft with the measured pace of someone who had completed another day's work in the application of precision weapons to moral problems that defied conventional solutions. Behind her, the compound burned with the particular intensity of modern materials exposed to extreme heat, black smoke rising into the desert sky like a signal beacon visible for dozens of kilometers. The facility that had served as a coordination center for regional trafficking operations was now a collection of rubble and ash, its secrets preserved for intelligence analysis, but its functionality permanently destroyed. Exceptional work, Castellanos. Colonel Hendricks approached through the settling dust, her voice carrying the professional appreciation of a commander who understood she had witnessed something that would be studied in military academies for decades to come. 17 confirmed kills, complete facility neutralization, 0 civilian casualties. This operation exceeded all tactical and strategic objectives. But Morrison was studying Reyes with the analytical intensity of a professional who had been forced to revise his understanding of individual capability versus institutional methodology. His team had served as backup and extraction support, but everyone understood that the operation's success had been determined by 8 precisely placed shots delivered from beyond visual range. That final shot was over 3,000 meters, he said, his voice carrying grudging admiration mixed with professional curiosity. In this heat, with atmospheric distortion, accounting for target movement across uneven terrain, I've been doing this for 15 years and I've never seen anything like it. Prophet nodded agreement, his thermal imaging data providing mathematical confirmation of achievements that challenged conventional understanding of human capability under extreme conditions. The ballistics alone required calculations that most operators couldn't perform in ideal conditions, much less in combat environment with multiple variables. The acknowledgement hung in the superheated air like recognition that some achievements existed beyond the reach of doctrine and standard operating procedures. Reyes had proven something that military institutions struggled to quantify, that individual excellence, properly applied, could sometimes achieve what conventional methodology could not. "Ma'am," Prophet continued, his analytical mind still processing what he had witnessed through electronic eyes, "I need to ask, how do you maintain that level of precision under extreme stress? The psychological factors alone should have degraded performance significantly." Reyes looked toward the burning compound, its smoke column rising into the desert sky like a monument to the application of skill and determination to problems that existed at the intersection of justice and necessity. Somewhere beyond the visible horizon, other facilities continued to operate, sheltering horrors that made international headlines and diplomatic nightmares. "Focus," she replied simply, her voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who had found purpose in the convergence of exceptional skill and moral clarity. Focus applied to targets that deserve everything they receive. The helicopter's engines began spinning up, preparing for the return flight to base. The debriefing session took place in an air-conditioned trailer that provided blessed relief from the desert heat. Its sterile interior decorated with maps, photographs, and the analytical detritus of military operations conducted at the intersection of precision and politics. Reyes sat across from a collection of officers whose combined experience represented decades of special operations, intelligence work, and the particular bureaucracy that transformed individual achievements into institutional doctrine. 2 facilities eliminated in 3 weeks, Colonel Hendricks announced, reading from preliminary after-action reports that would eventually become classified case studies in unconventional warfare methodology. Combined total of 25 confirmed kills, 0 civilian casualties, strategic disruption of regional trafficking networks that intelligence assets estimate will require 6 months to reconstitute. The numbers told only part of the story. The psychological impact of the operations had created ripple effects throughout criminal networks that extended far beyond immediate tactical success. Intercepted communications spoke of abandoned facilities, canceled operations, and the growing legend of a sniper who could reach through any defense to deliver death with mathematical certainty. Major Webb consulted intelligence summaries that attempted to quantify achievements that challenged conventional understanding of force multiplication and individual capability. Regional assets report that similar facilities across 3 countries have implemented enhanced security measures, specifically designed to counter long-range precision fire. The enemy is adapting their doctrine to account for your methodology. The implicit complement carried strategic significance. Military history was filled with innovations that forced adversaries to modify their entire approach to warfare. But few individual operators had achieved such systemic impact through the application of personal skill to tactical problems. "The question," Morrison said, his voice carrying the measured tone of a leader who was still processing recent events, "is sustainability. What we've witnessed over the past 3 weeks represents exceptional performance under specific conditions. Can this methodology be systematized, taught, incorporated into standard operational doctrine?" Captain Vasquez spread additional photographs across the table, satellite imagery, showing the aftermath of operations that had transformed functioning criminal enterprises into collections of rubble and ash. The intelligence value alone justifies continued operations. Each facility yielded information about financing, supply chains, personnel networks. We're mapping criminal infrastructure across the entire region. But Reyes understood the subtext of the discussion. Military institutions were designed to create reproducible results through standardized training and equipment. What she had accomplished existed at the intersection of exceptional individual capability and circumstances that could not be easily replicated or systematized. "You can't mass-produce what happened at those compounds," she said quietly, her voice cutting through the analytical discussion with the authority of someone who had transformed theory into reality through the application of skill and determination. "You can teach marksmanship, ballistics, tactical positioning, but this isn't just technique." The trailer fell silent except for the humming of air conditioning systems struggling against the desert heat. Through the small windows, the Iraqi landscape stretched toward horizons that held both promise and threat in equal measure. "Then what is it?" Hendricks asked, her question carrying the weight of institutional curiosity and command responsibility. The question hung in the air-conditioned atmosphere like a challenge to everything military doctrine taught about training, capability development, and the transformation of individual potential into institutional effectiveness. Reyes looked toward the trailer's small window, where the desert sunset painted the sky in shades of fire and gold that reminded her of other battles in other places where mathematics had been applied to moral problems with surgical precision. "Grief," she replied, her voice carrying the quiet certainty of someone who had found purpose in the intersection of loss and necessity. "Grief focused through training, experience, and the mathematical certainty that some problems can only be solved through the precise application of physics to deserving targets." The admission carried weight that extended beyond tactical discussion into the realm of psychology and human motivation. The officers around the table had witnessed exceptional performance, but understanding the source of that performance required acknowledgement that some achievements existed beyond the reach of conventional training methodology. Morrison leaned forward, his expression carrying the analytical intensity of a professional who recognized he was discussing something that challenged fundamental assumptions about warfare and human capability. "You're talking about weaponizing trauma, converting personal loss into tactical advantage." "I'm talking about finding purpose," Reyes corrected, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had stared into the abyss and found meaning in the application of exceptional skill to worthy causes. "Miguel taught me precision. The army taught me tactics. But what happened at those compounds came from understanding that some people deserve exactly what they receive." Captain Vasquez consulted psychological evaluations that attempted to quantify factors beyond technical skill and tactical training. The performance metrics suggest operation under conditions that would degrade most operators' effectiveness. Extreme stress, emotional investment, personal stakes that typically compromise professional judgment. But the numbers told a different story. Under conditions that should have produced degraded performance, Reyes had achieved precision that exceeded peacetime training standards. The psychological factors that military doctrine identified as performance inhibitors had somehow been converted into tactical advantages. "The enemy made it personal when they chose their profession," Reyes continued, her dark eyes reflecting the trailer's fluorescent lighting with an intensity that spoke to depths of determination that existed beyond conventional understanding. "Every shot I took represented justice applied to targets who had forfeited their right to consideration through their choice to profit from human suffering." Colonel Hendricks made notes on evaluations that would eventually reach decision-makers whose job was to balance individual capability against institutional requirements. The operations had succeeded beyond all tactical and strategic objectives, but the methodology raised questions about sustainability, reproducibility, and the broader implications of weaponizing personal trauma. "What's next?" Morrison asked, his question carrying the practical concerns of a leader who understood that exceptional performers required exceptional management approaches. Through the trailer's window, the desert night was falling across a landscape that held secrets and threats in equal measure. Somewhere beyond the visible horizon, other facilities continued operations that made headlines and nightmares in equal proportion. "There are more compounds," Reyes replied simply. "More targets who deserve exactly what they're going to receive." The intelligence briefing began at 400 hours, projectors casting satellite imagery across the trailer's walls, while officers consumed coffee that had been brewed strong enough to fuel tactical vehicles. 3 new targets had been identified through the analysis of materials recovered from the destroyed compounds, facilities that represented the next level in the systematic dismantling of regional trafficking networks. "Target Alpha," Captain Vasquez announced, her laser pointer highlighting a compound approximately 60 kilometers northeast of their current position. "Intelligence indicates this facility serves as a regional training center, preparing personnel for operations across 3 countries. Estimated 47 personnel, mixed training cadre and students." The facility's layout appeared on the projection screen like a tactical problem waiting for geometric solution. Modern construction, defensive positioning that reflected professional military planning, and the particular configuration of buildings that suggested serious consideration of external threats. This wouldn't be another easy target acquisition scenario. "Target Bravo," the briefing continued, revealing a second compound positioned in mountainous terrain that would complicate long-range engagement scenarios. "Financial Operations Center, responsible for laundering proceeds from trafficking activities. Estimated 23 personnel, but heavily fortified with natural defensive advantages." Morrison studied the imagery with the analytical intensity of a professional who understood that each new operation carried escalating risks and complexity. The enemy was adapting, implementing countermeasures specifically designed to neutralize the precision shooting methodology that had proven so effective in recent operations. "Target Charlie represents the highest strategic value," Vasquez concluded, revealing imagery of a facility that looked more like a military installation than a criminal enterprise. Intelligence assessment indicates this location serves as regional command and control for the entire trafficking network. Estimated 60-plus personnel, including high-value leadership targets whose elimination would cripple operations across the entire region. Colonel Hendricks presided over the briefing with the methodical thoroughness of a commander who understood that success in future operations would require adaptation of methodology to increasingly challenging tactical conditions. The enemy had learned from recent defeats, implementing security measures that specifically targeted the advantages of long-range precision fire. The challenge, she announced, consulting preliminary tactical assessments, is that these facilities have been designed with your methodology in mind, Castellanos. Enhanced defensive positioning, counter-sniper measures, fields of fire that limit long-range engagement opportunities. The acknowledgement carried strategic significance beyond immediate tactical concerns. Military history had entered a new phase where individual capability was forcing systematic changes in enemy doctrine and defensive planning. The operations had achieved effects that extended far beyond immediate objectives. "Ma'am," Reyes replied, her voice carrying the quiet confidence of someone who had faced escalating challenges before, "they can adapt their defenses, but they can't change the fundamental mathematics of ballistics applied to deserving targets. Physics doesn't negotiate with architectural improvements." Prophet consulted thermal imaging data that revealed the complexity of the new tactical environment. These facilities show evidence of professional defensive planning, overlapping fields of fire, redundant communications, escape routes designed to prevent the kind of systematic elimination we achieved in previous operations. The challenge was clear. Future success would require evolution of methodology to overcome adaptive countermeasures. The helicopter lifted off in pre-dawn darkness, its rotors cutting through air that still held the desert's accumulated heat from the previous day. Through the aircraft's windows, Reyes watched the landscape scroll past like pages in a military manual written in sand and stone, each ridge and valley representing potential firing positions that could serve the mathematical requirements of long-range precision engagement. Target Alpha lay ahead in the growing light, its modern defensive configuration clearly visible through satellite imagery that had been updated every 6 hours for the past week. The facility's planners had obviously studied recent operations, implementing countermeasures specifically designed to neutralize the advantages that had made previous engagements so devastatingly effective. Overwatch, this is command. Latest intelligence indicates the target has implemented rotating patrol schedules, randomized defensive positioning, and counter-sniper measures that include thermal masking and acoustic detection systems. Colonel Hendricks' voice carried the professional concern of a commander who understood that escalating tactical complexity required corresponding evolution of operational methodology. Morrison's voice joined the communication channel, his team having established observation positions that would provide overwatch and extraction support for whatever developed in the next few hours. Sledge team in position. Visual confirmation on target facility. Recommend extreme caution. This doesn't look like the previous targets. Through the helicopter's enhanced optics, Reyes studied the facility that would serve as the testing ground for adaptive methodology applied to adaptive defenses. The compound's builders had clearly learned from recent operations, implementing security measures that reflected professional understanding of long-range precision threats. Roger, command. Visual on target. Assessing tactical situation. Her voice carried the calm professionalism of someone who had faced escalating challenges throughout her military career, each operation requiring innovative solutions to problems that existed at the intersection of human capability and technological limitation. The facility below represented more than just another tactical objective. It was a direct challenge to the methodology that had proven so effective in previous engagements, a test of whether individual excellence could continue to overcome institutional adaptation by adversaries who had learned to fear the mathematical certainty of precision applied to moral problems. Prophet, I need detailed thermal imaging on defensive positions, pattern analysis on patrol schedules. These people have been studying our previous operations. The request carried acknowledgement that this engagement would require adaptation of techniques that had achieved near-perfect effectiveness under different conditions. The helicopter circled the target at maximum standoff distance. Electronic equipment mapping defensive configurations that would determine whether the next few hours would represent continued success or the first tactical failure in a series of operations that had exceeded all expectations. Ma'am, Prophet's voice carried analytical concern. This facility has been specifically configured to counter long-range precision engagement. We're looking at a completely different tactical problem. Through the aircraft's windows, the desert sun climbed toward another day of superheated air and mathematical challenges that would test the limits of human capability applied to adaptive problems. The hide position offered a commanding view of the target facility from 2,800 meters, but the defensive improvements were immediately apparent through the scope's magnified optics. Thermal masking screens disrupted heat signature identification. Randomized patrol patterns prevented predictable targeting opportunities, and acoustic sensors positioned throughout the compound's perimeter would detect the sound signature of high-velocity rifle fire within seconds of shot placement. This is different, Prophet reported from his observation position, thermal imaging equipment struggling to penetrate countermeasures that reflected professional understanding of surveillance technology. Standard thermal imaging is compromised by masking systems. Personnel count is difficult to establish. Movement patterns appear randomized. Through her scope, Reyes studied defensive modifications that represented direct response to her previous methodology. The facility's planners had obviously analyzed the fortress and compound operations, implementing specific countermeasures designed to neutralize the advantages of long-range precision fire. It was military adaptation in real time, doctrine evolving to counter threats that challenged conventional understanding of individual versus institutional capability. Overwatch, this is command. Latest intelligence indicates the facility has implemented enhanced communication protocols, including backup systems that would prevent the kind of communications disruption achieved in previous operations. Colonel Hendrick's voice carried the measured concern of a commander who understood that tactical evolution required corresponding adaptation of methodology. Morrison's voice crackled through the tactical frequency. Sledge team confirms enhanced defensive measures, motion sensors, thermal masking, patrol patterns that show evidence of professional military planning. Recommend conventional assault approach with full team coordination. The suggestion was tactically sound but strategically unsatisfying. Conventional assault would achieve the mission objective, but at costs measured in casualties and the loss of psychological impact that had made previous operations so strategically effective. The fear factor created by seemingly impossible precision would be replaced by standard military methodology. Negative Sledge. I need 30 minutes to assess the tactical problem. Through her scope, Reyes studied defensive arrangements that challenged her understanding of what was possible within the constraints of individual capability and available equipment. The mathematical precision that had served so effectively required adaptation to conditions specifically designed to counter her advantages. The morning sun climbed higher, atmospheric distortion, increasing with each degree of temperature rise. The facility below seemed to shimmer in the heat waves, its defensive configurations challenging the intersection of ballistics and geometry that had made previous operations so devastatingly effective. Prophet, I need analysis of the masking systems, pattern recognition on defensive measures, there has to be a weakness in their countermeasures. The request carried acknowledgement that this operation would require innovation beyond previous methodology. Through the scope's reticle, 47 targets moved through patterns designed to deny the kind of systematic elimination that had characterized her recent achievements. The challenge was clear: evolve or fail against adversaries who had learned to fear mathematical precision applied to moral problems. The breakthrough came through careful analysis of the facility's architectural limitations, patterns that couldn't be completely masked by technological countermeasures. Despite thermal screening and randomized patrol schedules, the compound's builders had been constrained by functional requirements that created predictable vulnerabilities for someone who understood the intersection of geometry and ballistics. "I have a solution," Reyes announced, her voice carrying the quiet confidence of someone who had identified the mathematical framework that would transform defensive improvements into tactical opportunities. The masking systems create blind spots that can be exploited through calculated deflection shots. Their countermeasures actually channel targets into predictable positions. Prophet's thermal imaging confirmed the assessment, revealing patterns within apparent randomness that reflected the fundamental constraints of human behavior under stress. Confirmed, the defensive improvements create chokepoints that could serve as targeting opportunities for someone who understands the facility's traffic flow patterns. Through her scope, the compound revealed its secrets through patient observation and the application of analytical thinking to problems that existed beyond conventional tactical doctrine. The thermal masking that prevented direct target acquisition also created shadows where defenders believed they were safe from long-range precision fire. "First shot will be a deflection," she announced, adjusting her scope to account for angles that challenged conventional ballistic calculation. "Concrete wall, eastern position, calculated ricochet that will find targets using thermal masking for concealment." Morrison's voice carried skeptical professionalism. "Deflection shots through thermal masking. That's beyond standard ballistic calculation, even for precision shooting specialists." But mathematics didn't negotiate with skepticism. The bullet would travel its calculated trajectory according to the fundamental laws of physics, regardless of institutional opinion about what was possible under extreme conditions. The fortress of Qasr al-Hadra had proven that individual excellence could overcome defensive preparation through the precise application of ballistics to geometric problems. "Acoustic sensors will triangulate firing position after first shot," Prophet warned, his equipment tracking electronic countermeasures that would compromise her hide position within seconds of initial engagement. "You'll have limited time before they establish counter-sniper fire." The tactical problem was becoming clear: achieve maximum effect with minimum exposure, using the facility's own defensive improvements as force multipliers for precision fire delivered from beyond conventional engagement ranges. It was military geometry applied to moral algebra, with human lives serving as variables in calculations that would determine strategic success or tactical failure. "Understood. Initiating engagement sequence." Her finger found the trigger, taking up slack with the practiced motion of someone who had reduced warfare to its essential mathematics. Through the scope, the target facility awaited the application of physics to problems that existed at the intersection of justice and necessity. The first shot would determine whether adaptation could overcome countermeasures specifically designed to neutralize individual excellence. The deflection shot struck the eastern wall at precisely calculated angle, the bullet fragmenting into supersonic shrapnel that found 3 defenders positioned behind thermal masking systems they had believed provided absolute concealment. The mathematical precision of the ricochet pattern confirmed that geometry could overcome technology when applied by someone who understood the fundamental laws of ballistic physics. 3 tangos down, eastern sector, Prophet reported, his thermal imaging tracking the chaos spreading through the facility as defenders realized their countermeasures had been turned against them. Acoustic sensors are attempting to triangulate firing position, but the deflection is creating false targeting data. Through her scope, Reyes watched the compound's defenders scramble to adapt to a threat that challenged their understanding of what was possible within the constraints of long-range precision engagement. Their enhanced defensive measures had created predictable patterns that could be exploited by someone who understood the intersection of architecture and ballistics. Her second shot was a direct engagement, finding a communications officer who had exposed himself while attempting to coordinate response to an attack that seemed to come from impossible angles. The bullet's 2,800-meter journey ended with the terminal ballistics that severed command and control links between the facility and its supporting network. 42 personnel remaining, she reported, chambering her third round with the mechanical efficiency of someone who had converted adaptive countermeasures into targeting opportunities. Communications disrupted, defensive coordination compromised. The facility's acoustic sensors had been confused by the deflection methodology, their triangulation algorithms producing false positives that sent security teams searching for sniper positions that didn't exist. The technological advantage had been neutralized through the application of ballistic science to geometric problems that existed beyond the reach of electronic countermeasures. Morrison's voice carried grudging admiration. "I don't understand how you're making those shots work. The deflection angles alone should make accuracy impossible at that range." But accuracy was simply the practical application of mathematical certainty to physical,